Mr. Ellis Stone, how are you?
Good, how are you?
I'm doing all right. So, this is our fourth in a series of emerging Black leaders that we have been running really to educate the community, right?
Okay,
And
yeah.
Ellis, as I mentioned, is somebody that even CEOs have to prospect. And, probably several months ago, I reached out. And it is great to have you and introduce you and have you part of the network here and talk literally about your experience, your journey from the SDR role into a manager role and so forth, right? And so the purpose of these meetings on Wednesday is really just a casual conversation, 20 to 30 minutes really around your experience, racism, what's going on in the world today. And then we'll have a 20-minute Q&A. There's a lot of sales individuals on, as well as VPs of sales. There's been a couple investors that jump on as well to really listen and learn. And it's great to see the community come together, learn through this process. And I certainly appreciate it. But today's about you. So I'll turn it over to you. Talk a little bit about your background. And as I mentioned to you before, like I missed the 4-year degree on the LinkedIn and talk
Yeah.
through that. And I think that's education for the community,
Yeah.
as well as your journey to management, which is you're the first manager that's been on here in leadership. So excited to hear that as well.
All right, so like you were saying, I don't have a traditional 4-year degree. I kind of took the long road here. So I graduated from East Boston High, and then about a year after that, I had my first child. So I had my first child at 20 years old, and then I had my second child at 21. So I didn't really have time to go to college. I had to make money, so I did the retail route. So I worked in retail for a while. And then I did retail management, which I did like, but the hours are long and crazy, whatever. So about 2 years ago, my wife got pregnant again, and I said, no, I don't want to do retail anymore. I don't want to work the long hours, don't want to work the weekends. I need a change. So I just started applying for a bunch of different SDR roles, even some roles I probably wasn't qualified to do. But I was just like, let's just see what happens. And unfortunately, a restaurant software company out of Boston gave me a chance. I was their only SDR. It was a big learning curve, but I did it. I kind of took all the skills that I learned from retail sales into the SDR role. So from face to face to over the phone, and I killed it. They laid off everybody, unfortunately, but then I got another job in tech sales after that. And I was there for a few months, and then I landed in CareAccess Research. I was the only SDR at CareAccess Research. But what I noticed was they were missing a lot of things in their process. They wasn't using a lot of channels to get prospects. So I took it upon myself to build a process and do it my own way. And fortunately, the CEO, he seen that and he said, know what, let's give you a chance to kind of get your own team. So last year, he made me a supervisor and gave me a couple of people to run. We did great. And just a couple of weeks ago, I got promoted to the manager, and now my team's going to expand and get larger.
Got it. And talk a little bit about your space compared to tech in terms of the SDR,
Yeah,
traditional tech SDR
bro.
environment.
Yeah, so I work in the clinical trial space. And just like tech sales, diversity is a problem. We don't really see a lot of African Americans, a lot of Spanish people, or a lot of women in general. But it's a different path, but it's the same structure. You have to set goals, you have to hit quota, you have to get sits, you have to prospect, and you have to set meetings for the AE. And we're just offering a different solution than we would in tech sales. That's it.
Got it. So as we progress into this new world, 2020, right? And we've seen a lot of challenges, COVID, the death of George Floyd, now this movement on diversity in a lot of companies. But the core underlying issue is racism exists in the United States, right? And I think if we dig deeper in that as an immigrant, right, like racism exists all over the world. And why do you think racism is misunderstood? And you're happy to provide an example, given your level of experience and so forth, about this topic as well, if you like.
Yeah, so I think racism is misunderstood because a lot of us think racism is only what you see on the surface, right? So we think racism is somebody calling you a racial slur or treating you differently because you're race. Those are the things that are easy to see. But racism is the most dangerous racism actually is the ones in the background. Racism is things like getting a higher interest rate because you're black, than your Caucasian counterpart, or being denied certain jobs simply because you have an ethnic name. Like myself, when I say like 5 years ago, I applied for a manager job at a retail store, and the guy told me, he said, you had one of the best interviews, you would be a great leader, just not for this demographic. And I was like, you just said that I would be a great leader. What's the issue? He said, people around here, they'll be more comfortable with a different type of person, but you would be great for a rep. So I wasn't good enough to lead the team because the demographic, but I'd be good enough for a rep, right?
Right.
So that's the most dangerous racism. That's the most destructive racism, because it can hurt generations. If I'm unable to get opportunities simply because I'm Black, that doesn't just affect me. That affects my children, my grandchildren, and other generations, because it stops generational wealth and generational growth. So it's misunderstood because people think it's only happened in the 60s or the 50s where Black people could only eat certain places. No, it's more dangerous now because it's hidden.
Yeah, I think it was funny for my own research. I was trying to look at SDRs and how many were Black out of
Yeah.
on LinkedIn, and I think I talked to somebody on my team. I had gone through 1,500 profiles, and of course, it's not a fair. Like, you got to go through a lot more. There's a lot of SDRs in the United States, but of those 1,500, there were 23 that were Black, right? And so even in any sort of data set, right, like 23 out of 1,500 is really interesting. So I think racism is misunderstood in a lot of different ways. I think it's not just obviously a Black, today we're talking about, the Black community, but I think if we look at industries, and tech is not the only industry, there are a lot of industries. I broke into pharma through a diversity initiative. So I was part of a program that was trying to accelerate diversity within it. And I think industries are starting to learn, and leaders are trying to understand that, to kind of combat racism, it's getting comfortable with the uncomfortable, right? So getting comfortable with the ability to communicate effectively with other people from different types of backgrounds. But also, I think on the other side of it is leaders have to be aware of their biases and so forth, and moving forward. So with everything going on with obviously racism and this topic, why is it important for us? We're both in sales and in trying to progress. Why is this important in just generally sales and business?
So are you talking about this conversation or just the racism in general?
Racism and everything going on, right? Like, racism has stirred a lot of conversation about wealth transfer. They talked about conversation of diversity. How do we incorporate, diverse programs to educate, teams?
Okay.
$8 billion is spent on diversity programs in the United States, yet I think we're all looking at that and saying, well, it hasn't worked, right? So why is this even important in sales and business?
So I think it's important for a couple of different reasons. It's not just important for the Black community. That's obvious, right? It's important for us to have these conversations and make these programs because, especially in sales, the bar to entry is low in sales, right? You don't really need a lot of experience a lot of time. You just need to be able to do the job. But sales is one of those industries where you can actually change their life. You can take somebody that's come from poverty, right? Teach them how to sell, get them a product sale, and they can make $100,000, right? If they do it correctly. So it's important for people in the Black community or underserved communities to have that opportunity. But in a broader sense, it's important because if you have more people with more opportunity, making more money, and they can take care of their family, things like crime go down, right? So it makes us better as a society. So if we just focus on like, it's going to be good for the Black community, right? The motivation for some is going to be little, but if we take it in a broader sense, like, you get people a better way of life, then we're all going to be safer. We're all going to be better off. So I think maybe that's one of the reasons why we're kind of stagnant in this conversation, because we think of it in one lens, like, oh, this is going to be great for the Black community. But hey, if Joe Smo is not Black or doesn't have Black friends, he might not care. But if he looks at it in a broader sense, like if more people have more opportunity to live in better lives, it's going to make my life better. It's going to make my life safer and my children's life safer.
Right. And you're right. It's a journey, right? And I think the piece we forget sometimes in business and especially in the nature of tech where it's growth, growth, growth. And
Yeah.
listen, every company needs to grow. We get that. That's called sustainability. And I think it's one of those pieces where we're thinking about growth, growth, growth. But in the broader context, if you're early career salesperson and you're trying to grow in your career and you have global responsibility, you inherently are going to be speaking and connecting with other people around the world. And what are you going to say during that conversation when somebody asks about, hey, what's happening in the United States, right? How are you going to answer that question? How are you going to essentially adapt, right, to those conversations? So each of your experiences and who you, associate yourself with is a learning experience. I've certainly had my share of good, bad, and different types of people I've worked with.
Yeah.
But the most interesting thing is I've been in 3 different industries. You now have been in tech and you're in clinical, and it gives you a different set of experiences that we need to be aware, right? And talk through that. So I think that's
my biggest eye opener was in tech. I was at the Google conference in San Francisco, and it was so little Black people there that every time we see one another, we would point to each other, and we'd automatically have that conversation because it was literally like maybe 5 of us, and it was like 3,000 people there. So that was real eye opening to me, right? But it also made me realize like I have experiences and opportunities that other people that look like me don't.
Right.
So it's my job to reach back and teach people how to get here and give them the same opportunities, because things like travel or things like talking to people from other countries, other backgrounds, it opens your brain and it makes you a better person as a whole. And I think everybody should have the opportunity.
Right. Agreed. So here's the question. You said you're hiring, looking for your next team, and
Yep.
thinking about somebody that you may hire, or even the individual that started in June or July, right out of school, right? Whether that's UMass Boston, UMass Amherst, UConn, Babson, whatever school that you went to or didn't go to school, as you mentioned. Yep. Now you're in a workplace, and you're an SDR and it's remote, and you're isolated, and you're seeing the things in the news, you're hearing, and if you're working in a large company, inherently you're going to be involved in diversity initiatives and so forth.
Yep.
What should you be doing for those early career individuals, whether you're white or Black? I've heard, of individuals that are like, should I be speaking up, at large companies, and others that are saying, Sasaki, should I be protesting? Should I be posting? What should I be doing?
The answer is simple. It's to succeed, right? You need to control what you can control. What you can control is your effort and your ability to hit your goals, right? So one of the quotes that I heard, I forgot who said it, is the most selfish thing you could do is be successful, right? Because the more successful you are, the bigger your voice is and more people's going to listen to it. So the best way to help others is to put yourself in a position where you can actually help people. Now, if you distract yourself with things like protesting or making noise at a company that you literally just started, nobody's going to care what you say, right? Because you don't have that authority to say so. Now, if you put your head down, you kill your goals, you're that reliable SDR, that reliable person that they know they can go to for numbers, your voice starts to matter a little more, right? And then they start taking suggestions like, hey, I think should look at my friend for this position, and you can bring other people up. But if you're just starting out, don't get distracted. Yes, there's a lot of crazy things going on, a lot of sad things going on. And because you're a good person, you want to help. I want to help too. But the best way you can help people is to help yourself and be successful. Point blank.
Yeah. So refreshing any VPs or leaders on the line, which is, hit your goal, right? Do your job well. Because I don't know, but just transitioning into the workforce, and if you do a couple of these transitioning from one industry to another, you're just learning inherently about the role, right?
Yeah.
And your voice will be heard. Certainly your manager, your VP, your director can't fight for you if you're not performing at the best level, right?
You can't help people if you're unemployed. So just do your job good. That's it.
Exactly. So it's a really important. I think that's a straight answer of, if you're early career, if you're entry level, and you're wondering. I think the added tip is, yes, hit your goal. I think the other piece of this is really make sure that you're being aware of everything that's going on, right? And make some time and effort within your organization to learn and really take in that learning. And I think your quote was, spoke about it and we talked a little about this. I'm a father as well. And you've got a 2-year-old that's just curious about the world.
Yeah.
And if we can flip this and say, be curious about the world again, right? Like, be curious about, what's happening in the world, and be curious about, what will be happening, because this isn't a conversation that's going to end, right? This isn't a conversation that's going to stop. And I think that's really important. So I want to go ahead.
No, actually, it might be a conversation that stops, and that's the sad part. What happens generally is it's news headlines. Everyone's really motivated to do something. Everybody's gun ho, and then it's out of the headlines, and nothing gets done. So right now, because things are starting to die down under the headlines, is where the real work begins. It's where it's really important, right? Because it's easier to be motivated when everybody's motivated. It's harder to be motivated when it's no longer headline news. So right now is when organizations can really put skin in the game, when it's not the big topic, and really get things done and buckle down and make an initiative.
Right. And I hope that we continue the conversation. I mean, that's why we're committing to doing this every week. Some people are like, isn't that a bit repetitive? Like, it takes time out of my day, time that I don't have, time that, you could be doing stuff. But it's an important conversation, right? 100%. And certainly we commit to kind of doing this through Q3. And my hope is somebody else will kind of pick up and continue this. But, this isn't it's not going to end in Q3 either, right? Like, we talk in numbers of Q3, that's October 1. We need to have this conversation. We need to be deliberate about it. We need to be vulnerable, right?
Exactly.
And mean that we're not going to get everything right.
Not at all.
And listening to the head of diversity and people operations of Zendesk, right? She Anne-Marie, she basically was like, listen, give people a little slack. There's a lot of moving parts right now. Nobody wants to be the brunt or like take that on in their own. And I think the first thing you can be is be a little bit curious, and sort of do some research, and then connect with individuals of color or individuals that aren't like you to have those conversations. I think that's really important. So I really appreciate, obviously, your time, and this is meant to be a little bit of a lunch and learn where people can listen and have questions. And as Awa on my team has kind of indicated, please shoot any questions that you might have to me privately. If you have specific questions, I won't be calling names out unless you want me to. And if you have specific questions for Ellis, you can shoot them to him privately. But I'll start with being in a leadership position. How have you fostered a diverse and inclusive environment?
So, embarrassingly, for the first 2 hires that I had, I kind of did what everybody else did. I looked the easiest route, right? People that have experience, people with college degrees, people that kind of just fit that mold. So that's what my team's kind of made of right now. But fortunately, the founder of the company actually came to me, and he said, he took a step back and had that uncomfortable conversation. Said, "Hey, looking at the organization, we're not doing a good job, right? And looking at my team for the first 2 hires, I didn't do a good job. So what I'm doing is I'm going to purposely look in areas where people might not look, right? Because I think what we do as an industry in sales is we miss a lot of opportunity to get really good individuals by only looking at the pools that we always look into. So me, man, I'm gonna look anywhere. So if I go to a T-Mobile store and I see a young man, a woman that has, personable, looks like they'll be good to learn, willing to learn, and hungry, I'll give that person a chance. And I think for us to really take a crack at diversity, we have to look at the areas and places we generally don't look at. We can't just look at, people with college degrees or people with SDR experience or people that's in that pool that we always go to. We have to think outside the box. So I'm going to demand of myself that I do that and make sure that my team reflects what the neighborhood looks like.
Yeah, no, that's great. And I think it calls to, like, I'll give you a little slack, which is, listen, if you're looking for Black individuals with experience, right, in Boston, there's not a lot, right, for the SDR role. And so I think there's a great article in Harvard Business HBR about if for women, right, hiring women. If there's one woman candidate out of 10, you're statistically not going to hire that woman, right? And so I think that's something that we got to think
Yes,
about.
I'll jump in here and ask you a couple questions as well.
I thought it was me. All right.
No, I think he did actually lose connection. But hi, I'm Awu. I am the co-host, so I'm here to hopefully save the day. But so I think the second question was, in your experience, like what has been some tools that you personally used in navigating and addressing racism in your like day-to-day life?
Perseverance is the biggest one. You gotta, one of the things that my mother did for me from a young age, and just to tell you guys my background is I'm half white and half black. So my mother's white, my father's black. But from a young age, my mother said, you have a white mother, but the world's going to see you as a black man and they're going to treat you as a black man. Be proud of that, but be prepared for that. So anytime I faced racism or discrimination, it never surprised me, right? So because I expected it, but I never let it get to me. I always pushed forward. I always pushed through it because ultimately I had a goal to be successful and for my family to have a better life than I did. So I think if you have a goal in mind and you don't let anything distract you from that goal, it becomes easier. And the other thing is to be curious. Try to learn from people. Try to observe people and see how to maneuver in those areas. A lot of the companies that I work for, I was the only black person there. And it can be really uncomfortable. And people can be really uncomfortable with you. But, all right, I'm back. I don't know what happened.
Problems with Zoom.
Yeah, 100%.
But let's talk about, one of the other questions was, what can people be doing, leaders be doing, given that there is a limited pool of talent, right? If you are trying to hire AEs or you're trying to hire, I think there's the debate of like, it's not a debate, hire the best person for the job.
100%.
How do we conceptualize that given the needs and the new mandate for diversity?
So I was telling my CEO, it's going to be on two fronts, right? So one is the now. So like I was saying, is for me, I'm going to look for talent with anywhere. I'm not just going to look at the traditional pools of people with 4-year degrees or people that have experience or just people that look like they check all the boxes. I'm going to look anywhere and everywhere for talent. And you have to do that sometimes. In order to get things to change, you have to do something different. So like for my example, if I'm at a store somewhere and I think somebody might be a great fit for my team based off his personality, his approach to his job or whatever, I might give that person a chance, even though I haven't seen his resume yet. He might not have a 4-year degree and he might not have any SDR experience, but if he has the bare minimum and the tools that I can teach around, then I'm gonna give a chance. So we have to be able to give people chances. Like they gave me a chance in my first SDR job. You have to be willing to give people chances. What was the second part of the question?
The second part of the question was, how do you, I think you answered it, which is, there's a limited part of pool, right? Mm-hmm. Especially from the Black community. But what should leaders be doing, outside of that?
So it's the two fronts. So that's the now, and then it's the later. So you have to get the underserved community exposure to this type of work, right? I know me growing up, all the adults around us had retail jobs. They worked at McDonald's or Macy's or whatever. We didn't even know that this type of job was around. So you have to actually be a part of the communities that you're in. Don't just talk about it. Put boots on the ground, connect with organizations, and tell kids that, hey, this is an opportunity that you can have right out of school. Look for this. That way, the new generation will be looking for this type of job and the talent pool will be larger.
Yeah, and I think about when I was in pharma, one of the things is making sure that the goals are aligned, and for individuals in inner cities, they may not want the same things that you want as an individual. They just want to understand the opportunity. So I spoke in an inner city school when I was in pharma, thinking about, well, my goals are Sasanka's goals inherently, moving up in the organization. For them, they were, it was a freshman in high school, was like, he couldn't get over the fact that I had a company car, right? Like a Mercury Mariner. He's like, so tell me, so you get a company car? Like, my parents have never had a car. Like, it's interesting to hear that, right? That's his motivation to just get there. Now, once he gets into the industry and so forth, it could be different, but really understanding that motivation and connecting with, communities and so forth. And I
Just
think,
for example, man, like when I started traveling for work, people around me thought it was the coolest thing, right? Because a lot of people, they didn't know that was possible. I can go on trips because of work. Um, so just exposure, man. We got to get people exposure in these neighborhoods, and we're not doing a good job doing that as of yet. So
what do you do if obviously there's a lot of conversations happening in organizations inside and out, but what if you're in a 250, 500 person organization and there's no conversation about this? What should you be doing?
that's tough. That's tough. You could do it by department, right? So you can't reach everybody in an organization that big. But if you have your department and your department head and you have that relationship, and it goes back to what we talk about, if you're a successful person within that organization, people tend to listen. So the first step is to be successful. Second step is to build those relationships with the department heads, because the department head is going to have the air of hire people that you can't reach, and start those conversations with them and see if they're willing to learn and listen. And if they're not, then you do it outside the organization and start conversations with other people in the industry so you could help that way. But I would say start at a department level.
Yeah. And I think I'll take the other stance from a leader or a new CEO perspective, which is if you are you're doing well in your role and further along, not just that third day SDR or third
Yeah.
month, don't be afraid to have a conversation with your manager of like, what's your stance on this, right? And people on my team, we've got a very, very small team, have brought that up to me, as we've, planned various things and, make sure that it's clear in terms of the goals and the stance and so forth. And I think we're in an interesting year because it's a political year as well. And we're not talking about politics here, right? We're talking about racial equity and that is, keep all the politics aside. That's a different weapon.
It's human decency. It's
human decency.
Giving people, and we got as everybody, as people in general, we have to be willing to, take jobs that align with our stances as well, right? We have to be willing to take jobs and look for jobs that their organizations reflects what you think, right? If you're with an organization that thinks that this is not an issue, I know for me, I wouldn't be in that organization anymore, right? Because it's clearly an issue. So as a person, when you're looking for a job, and this is just a little tip of advice, make sure that the organization aligns with you. Right. It's gonna make your job a lot easier. You're gonna grow a lot faster. You don't want to always have to swim against the current. So I think when job seekers have to start doing that, make sure that the job that they're going for is not only professionally going to be good for them, but personally and morally is going to align with what they believe in as well.
Awesome. Will your interview style and questions change and approach, assuming you are able to get that magical pool of diversity, right? A mixed bag of different types of experiences, color, female, male. Is your approaches and techniques, will that change or adapt?
Not at all, because I do things a little differently. I don't care about your background. That means nothing to me, really. Like I went to that because it's easier to get people for them. I really care about the raw elements of who you are, right? I don't care if you come from Harvard or you come from the projects, right? You have to be personable to be on my team. You have to be willing to learn to be on my team. You got to learn quickly. And you can't be a yes man. My team calls me out on my stuff all the time, right? And I like that because it makes me better. So that's what I'm looking for. I don't care about anything else. So because I don't care about anything else, my approach doesn't have to change. If I get somebody from a T-Mobile store, Verizon store, or a car dealership, if they have those raw elements, I could teach everything else, right? But if they don't, they have no business on my team. So I don't think it'll change for me personally.
Got it. And then I guess to wrap up, first of all, I want to thank everyone that joined and really appreciate the support, not only for Launchers, but really for this movement and really this conversation. But, to wrap up, two questions to you. Who are the leaders that you're following right now? BIPOC, right? Black, Indigenous, people of color. Or you would say, hey, look at these individuals and what they're doing. That's one. Two is any, final tips or advice for, we've got a really mixed bag of individuals in attendance today to think about with one thing as they leave this and we go back to our merry day.
Yeah, so one of the people that I follow, he's actually part of the group that I'm in. His name's KD. I think he's the VP of sales at Patient Pop.
Okay.
Yeah, you should definitely check him out. He's a really smart guy. I kind of think of him as a mentor from far. He's really good at his job, but he's also really involved in what we was talking about, and he's vocal about it. Doesn't make his stance shy at all. So KD would be somebody, and then I think his name's Morgan. Morgan.
Yep. Morgan
Yeah,
Ingram. Yep. Yep. He's a
yeah,
friend. Yeah. Yeah.
him,
Yeah.
him as well. He's a great person. He's part of the group that I'm part of as well. So those two people, I would definitely follow. Now, the piece of advice that I would give everybody is to keep a couple of things in mind. One is the African American community. We don't want handouts. Not looking for handouts at all. Simply just want an opportunity. So I think if you approach this problem with that in mind, right? We're not looking for people to come into the community and say, "Oh, poor people." We just want an opportunity. Place the opportunity in front of us, right? I think the other thing to come in mind is you gotta remember, right? The education system in these communities are not the greatest. So because they're not the greatest, a lot of people from these communities don't go to college or don't go to great colleges because we didn't start off in good places, right? So a lot of times to get the talent that you're looking for to make your organization more diverse, you can't look at the traditional places because they're not going to be there because we didn't have the opportunity when we was younger, right? We came from schools where we had to share books and there was no heat and it was hard to learn, right? So you have to look at different places, maybe in the retail space or car sales or what have you, right? Just have conversations with different individuals in different industries and to see if they can align with what you're trying to do. Right. I know it's easy to go to that pool that we all grab from because it just is what it is. It's low hanging fruit. But if you really care about this, you're going to have to broaden your horizon. Just keep that in mind. A 4-year degree does not make somebody a qualified candidate. I know single mothers right now that have no college degree that can outsell most Harvard grad students because all her life she had to struggle, she had to make ends meet, and she had to do more with less. And a lot of startups, what we do, more with less, right? So you have to keep that in mind when you're looking for people.
Right. And I think that's a key theme of, the two themes that I've heard, consistently in our fourth session here is one, what you should be doing if you're early career, do your job, right?
Yeah.
And hit your goal and whatever that is. Obviously sales is a metric results driven function and dictated by your success and failure. And I think any salesperson who's been in sales for 10 years have had both. Right.
Yeah.
And so do your job and it's your shot in the beginning. I think the second thing that I've heard consistently, and you're the fourth person now, is listen, I appreciate everything that is happening in the world, but I want to do my job and I want to do it well. Mm-hmm. And I worked excuse my language, my ass off to get to where I am. Just make sure that, things are fair as I continue to move in my career, right? Mm-hmm. And that there's options and opportunity. And I think that's where we're seeing not later in life, but later with experience in funding companies and so forth and thinking about it. And we're certainly, I think, making some good progress. I've seen some great things on LinkedIn and been, people have reached out, but we're far, far from where we need to be or be thinking about as a society, right? Yeah. So I'm really thankful that you had the opportunity to join us and wishing you obviously the best of luck in building this team and career and everything. And obviously we'll stay in touch, but if anybody has any other specific questions, please reach out to us via LinkedIn or myself. We'll certainly try to get to them. We're both, I would say, be patient. We're both fathers of young children and leading teams. Yep. And so trying to go through that as well through everything that's going on. But certainly appreciate it. Thank you, everyone, and speak to you next time.
Thank you.
All right. Take care.